Hello, you're listening to the Rot-Weiss-Rot Report, the podcast for those who live and work in Austria. Every week, we bring you the key events concisely and clearly so you stay informed about the changes that matter to your work, your paperwork, and your everyday life. Today in this edition, 250,000 hospitality workers are set to receive a pay rise. We will tell you when and by how much their wages will increase. Fuel, airfares, and rent are going up, while butter, milk, and electricity are coming down. We will break down what is happening with prices. Fines of up to 2,000 euros at children's playgrounds. We explain the new rules on cigarettes, vapes, and nicotine pouches. From Vienna's main railway station to the airport, there is now a train every 15 minutes. From the new year, Vienna will raise its tariffs for water, sewage, and waste collection. We will calculate exactly what is getting more expensive. All of this and much more coming right up.
Within 2 years, the public broadcasting fee could rise by 10%. The ORF management explains that costs are increasing while the current contribution has been frozen, meaning a serious budget deficit could emerge within a few years. Politicians respond that the agreement remains in force. The base rate is to be kept unchanged until the end of 2029. So bills are not changing for now, but the dispute over the future price of ORF has already begun. Currently, the base contribution stands at 15 euros and 30 cents per month, or 183 euros and 60 cents per year. In some federal states, a regional surcharge is added on top. Payment is made by one household per primary registered address. Whether you have a television, a radio, or a streaming subscription is irrelevant. The fee is tied to the address, not to the number of screens in the flat. There is an official way not to pay, but it requires a formal exemption. This option is available to people on low incomes who receive certain benefits, such as social assistance, unemployment benefits, Pflegegeld, the minimum pension supplement, or student support. So while politicians debate whether to raise the fee or not, it is worth checking a more immediate question: whether you already qualify for an exemption right now. The Federal Ministry of Finance, meanwhile, has issued a warning about a new wave of phishing attacks. Fraudsters are sending emails and SMS messages posing as Finanz Online, the tax authority, and Familienbeihilfe. They promise a tax refund or a family benefit payment and include a link to a page that looks almost identical to the official government site. They then ask you to enter your bank details, password, or a confirmation code. A few minutes later, instead of a state payment, the person finds a debit on their account. Losses from various forms of online fraud in Austria are already estimated at more than 115 million euros. The largest sums are taken not through sophisticated hacking, but through persuasive conversation. Callers pose as bank employees, threaten account blocks, offer investments, or claim there is an urgent refund to process. The victim is pressured to act quickly, before they have a chance to look at the website address.
So keep a few rules in mind. The tax authority will never ask you by email or SMS to provide a password, a code, or your full card details. Open Finanz Online only on your own initiative, via the official app or a web address you have typed yourself. If your details have already reached fraudsters, call your bank immediately, block your card and online banking, change your passwords, and report the incident to the police. Save the email, the phone number, the address of the fake page, and any screenshots. For investigators, this is far more useful than a browser history you deleted in a panic. A telltale sign of fraud is also the method of payment demanded. A government agency will never insist you urgently transfer a debt to a foreign account, buy a gift card, or install a remote access program. If in doubt, call your Finanzamt on a number taken from the official website. A new study has emerged in the meantime on the outlook for future pensions. According to it, 62% of working Austrians doubt they will be able to maintain their current standard of living once they retire. 53% openly express a fear of poverty in old age. Those most worried are people aged between 30 and 49. They know all too well the cost of housing and raising children, but retirement is still too far off for its size to feel predictable. Among women, anxiety is higher, and the reason is thoroughly practical. It is women who more often work part-time, spend longer periods at home with children, and accumulate gaps in their insurance record. By retirement age, those years return not as fond memories of nursery school, but as a smaller monthly payment. Survey participants who are saving additionally put around €288 per month on average toward private pensions or investments. For many families, that is a sum that first has to be found. You can check your own situation via the Pensionskonto using ID Austria. It shows your credited insurance months, contributions, and the projected sum accumulated to date. Pay particular attention to years when you changed employers, worked part-time, cared for a child, or moved to Austria. If part of your working life was in another country, ask the Pension Insurance Authority how it will be taken into account. The Pensionskonto rarely delivers pleasant surprises, but an error caught in time can prove very valuable. It is also worth looking not just at the projected figure, but at the income on which your employer is actually paying contributions. A person may work extra hours for years, receive part of their pay informally, and only discover just before retirement that, as far as the system is concerned, that portion of their salary never existed. Once you have checked the account, save the statement and repeat the check after a change of job, a period of parental leave, or extended unemployment.
Business and economy news. Let us start with good news for hundreds of thousands of people working in the hospitality industry. From the 1st of October, wages will rise for approximately 250,000 employees in Austrian hotels, restaurants, and catering establishments. The new sector-wide collective agreement provides for an average pay increase of 3%. The lowest paid fifth employment category, which accounts for the largest number of workers in the sector, will receive a more substantial rise of around 3.48%. Remuneration for young people in vocational training, the so-called Lehrling, will also increase by approximately 3.44%. In addition, most workers in the sector have been promised an additional one-off payment of €275. What is more, employers are entitled to voluntarily increase this amount to €500 without an additional tax burden, provided they meet the statutory financial conditions. This pay rise applies to cooks, waiting staff, reception personnel, housekeeping, and other employees whose work is governed by this collective agreement. When you receive your October payslip, Lohnzettel, at the beginning of November, be sure to check the new gross figure and the employment category listed, your Beschäftigungsgruppe. If you have been incorrectly placed in a lower category than the work you actually perform, even a correctly calculated percentage will be applied to an understated base rate. No separate applications are required. The new rates are applied automatically. If the updated rate does not appear in your calculation, contact your payroll department, and if necessary, seek free legal advice from the Arbeiterkammer or the relevant trade union, VIDA. Remember, the increase officially takes effect from the 1st of October, so it must be applied to all hours worked throughout October. For part-time employees, the hourly rate is raised in exactly the same way, and the total sum is simply recalculated according to hours worked. One final important reminder: tips have no bearing whatsoever on the collective rate. Generous guests and a busy evening at the restaurant do not entitle an employer to pay less than the agreed tariff.
That said, any increase in income is always viewed against the backdrop of how quickly prices are rising in the shops. And here we have fresh figures. In July, inflation in Austria slowed somewhat, settling at 2.8%. Yet behind this headline figure lie very different realities for each individual household budget. The sharpest blow to the wallet remains transport. Motor fuel rose by almost 18% over the year. Diesel added more than 19%, and super unleaded petrol about 15%. International airfares jumped by around 15.5%. To that must be added a notable increase in the cost of garage services, taxi rides, and car hire. Summer holidays and leisure also became considerably more expensive. Standard single rail tickets rose by about 4%, while annual season tickets leapt by more than 20%. Cable car tickets added nearly 5%. Stays at thermal spas rose by around 5%, and admission to indoor swimming pools by more than 10%. A night at a standard 3-star hotel with breakfast now costs 5% more, while prices at campsites, hostels, and resort complexes climbed on average by 12%. The most stable category was package holidays, which rose by just 1.5%. Among housing costs, the greatest pressure comes from rental prices, which climbed by nearly 5%, alongside increases in heating oil, pellets, and firewood. But there is positive news too. Electricity tariffs for private households fell by around 10% over the year, and mobile phone services became nearly 13% cheaper. The food basket also brings some relief. Butter fell in price by almost a quarter, and long-life UHT milk dropped by more than 20%. So that headline inflation figure of 2.8% looks quite different for every family. Someone renting their home, driving regularly, and flying on holiday feels price rises far more keenly than someone on a fixed rent, using public transport, and who secured a lower electricity tariff. And since cafes and restaurants raised their prices by more than 4%, cheaper butter in the supermarket does not guarantee a cheaper breakfast outside the home. So review your regular contracts. Switching to a better electricity or mobile tariff often saves more money than hunting for discounts at the supermarket.
Meanwhile, the consequences of the extreme summer heat will soon directly affect prices in supermarkets. Austrian farmers are currently tallying the damage from the drought. In many farms, the vegetable harvest has been reduced to as little as 45% of normal, and the fruit yield by nearly a third. The situation is most critical in the east of Austria, where critically insufficient water for irrigation coincided with the active growth period. As a result, produce either remained undersized or scorched in the sun, and in some cases, fields proved entirely uneconomical to harvest. For consumers, this will mean above all a reduction in the share of locally grown Austrian produce on the shelves and a greater reliance on imports. The effect is felt most quickly in seasonal vegetables and fruit, which cannot be readily substituted from other regions. The farmers themselves face direct losses. Even if the remaining produce sells at higher prices, this will not offset the loss of the greater part of the harvest. Beyond arable farming, the crisis has severely affected livestock operations. Scorched pastures have led to an acute shortage and sharp rise in the cost of feed, forcing some farms to send cattle to slaughter ahead of schedule. Agricultural associations are already calling on the government for large-scale support programs to fund irrigation systems, water reservoirs, and accessible crop insurance. Consumers are meanwhile advised, in the months ahead, to lean towards seasonal offerings. Produce with a short supply chain is always the most likely to retain a reasonable price tag. And while farmers and consumers look for ways to cut costs, representatives of big business are proposing rather radical remedies for the economy. The head of Lower Austria's Industrial Association, Carrie Oxner, has publicly called for the official working week to be extended to 41 hours and for 1 or 2 official public holidays to be abolished entirely. In his view, Austria has become too expensive a country in which to manufacture goods, and only an increase in working hours will allow businesses to compete on the international market. He added that ordinary employees would not even notice the extra hour. That phrase immediately provoked a wave of outrage. For the majority of employees in Austria, collective agreements set the working norm at 38.5 hours per week. A move to 41 hours means 2.5 additional hours every week, or roughly 130 hours per year. In practical terms, this amounts to more than 16 full working days, and with the abolished public holidays factored in, the total approaches an additional working month without a day off. Trade unions flatly rejected the proposal, emphasizing that competitiveness is built through innovation, automation, and sound management, not by returning to longer working shifts. There is no cause for premature concern. This statement remains solely the position of an industrial lobby group. The government does not support it, and no changes to labor legislation are being introduced. All the more so since the initiators have yet to answer the central question. Did they intend to increase salaries proportionally for those additional hours worked?
News for migrants. Let us begin with a development that directly affects everyday life: outings with children, and the prospect of substantial fines. Austria has introduced strict new rules governing tobacco and nicotine-containing products. The most severe penalty now applies to discarded cigarette butts and any similar litter left on the grounds of public children's playgrounds. A first offense carries a fine of up to 500 euros, and a repeat violation can reach 2,000 euros. It is important to understand that this ban is not limited to classic cigarette filters. The sanctions cover used nicotine pouches, commonly known as snus or pouches, the remains of disposable or reusable electronic cigarettes, cartridges, foil, and packaging. Under the rules, a clearly visible information sign with a warning must be posted beside each such playground. The act of smoking itself is governed by the municipal rules of the individual municipality or park. In some areas, children's zones are declared entirely smoke-free, while elsewhere, the new federal law targets specifically those who litter. The simplest and least expensive rule is therefore to step away from the children's area, extinguish the cigarette completely, and dispose of the butt exclusively in a bin, not in the sandpit, the grass, or a storm drain. In parallel, Austrian authorities have placed considerably stricter controls on tobacco-free nicotine pouches and similar substitutes. Clear age restrictions, a ban on open advertising, and specific regulations on their sale have been introduced. By the end of the year, the country is preparing to ban the sale of disposable e-cigarettes altogether, both those containing nicotine and those without. For owners of tobacco kiosks, trafic, shops, and food establishments, this is a signal to check carefully the age of buyers and their licenses, as the gray area for such products no longer exists. And at home, keep those brightly colored packages well away from small children, for whom they often look like ordinary sweets. The Austrian criminal police, meanwhile, are warning of a new wave of telephone fraud increasingly targeting foreigners. The scheme begins with so-called silent calls. You receive a call from an unknown Austrian or foreign number. You pick up, and all you hear is silence before the call drops after a few seconds. These are automated bots verifying that your SIM card is active and mapping your daily schedule. After a few days, the verified number is passed to fraudsters who then call you directly, posing as bank employees, police officers, or tax officials, threatening you with account blocks. If you hear silence on the line, end the call immediately. Do not call back, and add the number to your block list. And never give passwords, SMS codes, or bank card details to anyone who calls you first.
Our next topic is an important legal clarification for asylum seekers. Austria has, following Germany and Switzerland, resumed the return of refugees to Italy under the so-called Dublin Regulation. Why Italy specifically, and what does this actually mean? Under European Union law, a clear rule applies. An asylum application must be processed in whichever European country a person entered first. For the majority of migrants from the Middle East and Africa, that point of entry into Europe is typically the South. Italy, in particular, where their fingerprints are taken and their first registration takes place. But many people do not stay there. They travel independently into the heart of the continent, to Austria, Germany, or other countries, and lodge their asylum application there instead. Previously, Italy had unilaterally all but blocked the readmission of such individuals, citing the overload of its own system. However, following the adoption of the EU's new Migration Pact, this mechanism has been reinstated. Austrian migration authorities, upon identifying an initial registration in Italy, are now officially returning applicants there to continue their procedure, with the first individuals having already been issued train and bus tickets. Of course, each case is assessed individually. If a person has close relatives, minor children, or serious health conditions in Austria, the country may retain jurisdiction over the application. However, the applicant will always receive an official decision specifying a deadline for appeal. If you receive such a notification, you must immediately contact the State Legal Aid Agency (BBU) or consult a specialist lawyer, as missing the appeal deadlines effectively eliminates any chance of halting the transfer. And most importantly, this procedure concerns asylum seekers exclusively. It does not in any way affect those who are lawfully residing in Austria on a work visa, a student permit, temporary protection status, or an already granted official refugee status. To close this section, the latest statistical data on migration in the country. In July, Austria received 244 primary asylum applications. This is the lowest monthly figure in the past 10 years, and nearly 3 times fewer than in the same month last year. Including repeat applications and applications from children born to refugee families already in Austria, the total for the month came to 840 submissions. Overall, in the first 7 months of this year, the number of applications filed has fallen by approximately 45%. The government attributes this trend to a combination of measures: reinforced border controls, restrictions in family reunification programs, and more active cooperation on the return of irregular migrants. Over the same period, nearly 9,000 people left Austrian territory. Roughly half were removed by force, while the remainder departed voluntarily. As a result, the number of people in the state's basic support system, Grundversorgung, has fallen to approximately 43,000, marking a record low over the past 20 years. That concludes our migration news, and next we turn to the key events in Vienna.
Let us begin with a criminal story whose resolution reads like a thriller and has brought relief to thousands of city residents. Vienna police have arrested 2 men suspected of a high-profile series of apartment burglaries carried out using concentrated nitric acid. The perpetrators poured the chemical directly into the keyhole. The acid corroded the metal locking mechanism, after which the thieves gained unimpeded access to the apartments. Similar attacks had previously been recorded in at least the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 10th, 12th, and 19th districts of the capital. The story came to its conclusion in the early hours in the 3rd district. Vigilant neighbors heard suspicious sounds on the staircase and immediately called the police. Sensing danger, the 2 suspects got into a car and set off at high speed along the A4 motorway towards the Slovak border. Vienna officers passed an urgent alert to their colleagues in Lower Austria, and by around 5 in the morning, the fugitives were intercepted and stopped. The car contained 2 Georgian nationals, each around 40 years of age. Both have been arrested, and the investigation is now checking their possible involvement in other similar incidents across the city. Police are once again emphasizing, if you notice white residue near your lock and detect a sharp chemical smell, do not, under any circumstances, touch anything with your bare hands. Acid causes instant, deep burns. Move away immediately, warn your neighbors, and call the emergency number 133. In the event of strong vapors, call the fire brigade on 122. Photograph any suspicious marks with your phone. Be sure to inform your building management, Hausverwaltung, and before going on holiday, always ask someone to collect your post. The next significant story concerns the wallet of every Viennese resident. The city authorities have officially announced an upcoming increase in utility tariffs to take effect from January. Cold water will rise in price by approximately 4.6%. A cubic meter will cost €2.37, up from the current €2.27. Wastewater and sewage charges will increase from €2.49 to €2.60 per cubic meter. The tariff for waste collection will also rise by an average of 4.5%. The city administration explains the indexation as an automatic price adjustment mechanism tied to inflation, as well as large-scale infrastructure investment. Around €130 million are spent each year on modernizing the water supply network alone, and hundreds of millions will be invested in treatment facilities and the sewage network through to 2031. According to opposition estimates, the new tariffs will bring an additional €42 million into the city coffers. At the same time, parking rates will not be revised under this index next year. In the majority of rented apartments, these services are automatically included in the monthly operating costs, Betriebskosten. Accordingly, the increase will be reflected either in updated monthly advance payments or in the final annual settlement. So now is an opportune moment to pull out last year's Betriebskostenabrechnung and compare your water consumption. If the bill has jumped sharply, check your plumbing. An ordinary, barely noticeable leak in a cistern is capable of draining far more money from your pocket than a 10-cent rise in the price of a cubic meter.
There is also welcome news in the capital's infrastructure, particularly on the health front. A new large primary healthcare center, Medizin Währing, has opened in Vienna's 18th district. It is located at Gänzgasse 70 and accepts patients under standard state health insurance. All you need for a visit is your ordinary e-card, making it an excellent alternative to long queues at hospital outpatient departments. The center's key advantage is comprehensive care under one roof. General practitioners, nurses, clinical psychologists, and dietitians all work here together. The facility sees adults and children from 1 year of age, administers vaccinations, takes laboratory samples, records ECGs, treats wounds, manages patients with chronic conditions, and even offers home visits. The center is open Monday to Friday. Appointments can be made online or by calling the city number 0147 05 738. And a reminder, in the evenings and at weekends, call 1450 for medical advice. And in emergencies, dial the ambulance service on 144. In the meantime, there is convenient transport news for travelers. Vienna's main railway station has substantially improved its connection to the capital's airport. Trains on this route now depart every 15 minutes. Rail operator ÖBB has added direct regional express services, REX, running in parallel with the popular Railjet and intercity trains. For passengers traveling with large suitcases, this is currently the fastest and most comfortable way to reach the terminals. These changes were made in response to the recent cable trunk fire on the urban rail network, the effects of which continue to disrupt the S7 city train service. Replacement buses are currently operating between Wien Mitte and Geiselbergstrasse, and although the train continues on its route from Geiselbergstrasse onward, changing with luggage takes considerable time.
Be sure to check timetables in the ÖBB Scotty or Wien mobile apps and allow extra time when heading to your flight. Another major city story concerns the distribution of the social welfare budget. According to fresh financial reports, Vienna spends more on its social assistance system than all 8 other Austrian federal states combined. In the last reporting year, the capital allocated almost 983 million euros in benefits, while the combined spending of all other regions came to around 334 million. At current estimates, this year Vienna's expenditure will exceed the 1 billion euro mark altogether. This imbalance is explained by the large concentration of people without a stable income, the high cost of renting accommodation, and the specific structure of the capital's basic benefit payments. These figures have reignited a government dispute about tightening oversight and standardizing rules across the country. For those receiving support, a simple reminder: the Sozialamt requires immediate notification of any changes, a new side job, a partner moving in, or additional income. A missed form or a concealed source of earnings will lead not only to the suspension of payments, but also to a demand that sums already paid be returned to the state. That concludes our main stories from the capital, and we now move on to news from the federal states, bringing you what has been happening across the rest of Austria.
We begin with an extraordinary incident in Lower Austria. In the town of Winzendorf, in the district of Wiener Neustadt, a powerful explosion occurred at a facility manufacturing pyrotechnic components. According to preliminary findings of the investigation, an uncontrolled chemical reaction occurred inside a container of production waste. The blast wave partially destroyed the factory building and triggered a severe fire. A 45-year-old factory worker sustained serious injuries and was urgently airlifted to a Vienna hospital. Doctors have since confirmed that his life is not in danger. Around 100 employees were evacuated in time to a neighboring school. Approximately 100 rescue workers from 13 fire brigades arrived to deal with the emergency, swiftly containing the blaze and eliminating the risk of toxic contamination for residents of nearby buildings. The firefighting operation was extremely hazardous owing to the nature of the chemicals involved, which react violently to contact with water and high temperatures. The precise circumstances of the incident are now being investigated by experts, police, and the Labor Inspectorate. Employees of the company have already spoken to journalists about systematic safety violations at the facility. For those working at hazardous sites, this is an important reminder. Document all violations in writing. Send formal notifications to management, to the Works Council, Betriebsrat, or directly to the Labor Inspectorate. Verbal warnings after an accident are treated as subjective recollections. An official email, by contrast, is an irrefutable legal document.
Meanwhile, in Upper Austria, medical staff and authorities are contending with a serious outbreak of a dangerous infection, Legionnaire's disease. In Linz, at least 26 people have fallen gravely ill with the condition, 3 of whom have died. The majority of patients are being monitored in the state's hospitals, while some have required intensive care and mechanical ventilation. 2 of those who died were over 80 years of age and had coexisting chronic conditions. The 3rd patient was just over 50. Legionnaire's disease is a severe infection and inflammation of the lungs caused by Legionella bacteria. They multiply actively in warm, stagnant water and enter the body via airborne water droplets when fine water mist is inhaled. For example, in showers, air conditioning systems, jacuzzis, or near industrial cooling towers. The infection does not spread from person to person. Specialists have taken more than 150 water samples across Linz and identified the bacteria in the cooling circuits of Linz AG on Wienerstrasse. All equipment has since been thoroughly disinfected. Medical advice is, when returning from holiday, always allow the water in your home shower to run for several minutes, and, should you develop a fever, dry cough, fatigue, and severe shortness of breath, call the ambulance service immediately on 144. In Upper Austria, the criminal police are also investigating a remarkably peculiar crime. From the private garden of a 74-year-old resident of the village of Mosendorf, unknown persons stole a collection of 200 garden gnomes and ceramic figurines. The woman had been collecting them over 34 years, with the most prized pieces given to her as gifts by family members. The thieves removed the gnomes in several loads using a large vehicle, and police are now examining their faces from CCTV footage. Officers are monitoring classified advertising sites and are urging members of the public to report any suspicious bulk offers to sell garden figurines in the region.
In Salzburg, police have solved a high-profile crime. Investigators have identified 2 suspects in the deliberate arson of a gymnasium in the town of Hallein. The fire in spring completely destroyed the school library, which was considered one of the largest in the entire federal state. Thousands of unique books, archives, equipment, and furniture were lost in the blaze, with direct damages estimated at between 200 and 300,000 euros. Due to heavy smoke and toxic fumes, the school's operations had to be suspended for a period. The suspects turned out to be a 16-year-old pupil of the gymnasium and her 17-year-old acquaintance, who did not attend the school. According to investigators, the teenagers brought in a flammable mixture and deliberately set fire to the shelving. The boy has already partially admitted his guilt, while the girl declined to give evidence. The case will be referred to court under juvenile justice norms. However, the school has lost irreplaceable historical volumes and donated copies that can never be recovered. And to close this edition, an instructive road story from Salzburg that began with an ordinary kebab and ended with a substantial court fine of 275 euros. A man tried late at night to board a city bus carrying a hot, wrapped meal. The driver refused to let the passenger on, citing the risk of soiling the interior and the pungent smell, whereupon the man launched into a loud argument and refused to disembark. The matter was settled by a call to the police and a local court. 250 euros for breach of public order and failure to comply with lawful instructions from staff, plus 25 euros in court costs. The transport operator itself has reminded passengers that carrying food on public transport is permitted, but if a driver raises an objection, the matter should be resolved through a formal complaint after the journey, so that a quick meal costing a few euros does not become an expensive administrative protocol.
And on that note, we conclude our review of the past week's events. We will continue to keep you informed of the most important developments. Subscribe to the weekly podcast, Rot-Weiss-Rot Report, the podcast for those who live and work in Austria. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. Until next week.